I used to think that everybody in the early 1900s and every time period before that used to eat incredibly simple. That all they ate was simply a beef roast and mashed potatoes and a vegetable that they had growing on the farm. However, that's simply not the case. As I've been going through all of these old cookbooks, I see so many tremendous ideas and recipes that they used to make. And so today we're going back to the very early 1900s and we're going to make a chicken stew with homemade noodles. Our recipe today comes from the second edition of Crumbs from Everybody's Table, which was a cookbook compiled for the ladies of St. Paul's Guild in Salinas, California. This is a church cookbook. Our recipe today calls for a young hen that is cleaned and cut up. Yeah, I'm not cleaning a young hen. So instead, what I'm doing is I am going to use some boneless, skinless chicken breasts as well as some boneless chicken thighs that I have, and they're going to be boiled in place of doing a whole hen. Now, you could use a whole chicken. I could do that. I could cut up just a whole chicken, but I don't have that here, and I didn't feel like going to the grocery store today, so we're going to be using the chicken breasts and the chicken thighs, and that's going to be fine. We're going to start our noodles out by sifting together 2 cups of flour and a teaspoon of salt. And after we do that, we are going to add 3 eggs and simply mix that together. After your dough is mixed, we're going to transfer that onto a dry surface. I'm just going to lightly flour that. I don't think it's really going to need much flour down here, but I'll do it anyway. And we're going to roll this out into a thin sheet. And after we've rolled it out, we're simply going to let it rest and dry for about an hour. So as I mentioned before, normally back in 1902 you would have had a whole chicken that you would have cut up. However, I've got some chicken thighs here and I've got some chicken breasts, and it's kind of the same thing as having a whole chicken. Yes, I don't have legs and I don't have wings and I don't have a neck and all of that, but this is going to be fine. We're just going to put our chicken in, and then after the chicken's in, you're going to cover it with water. Alright, our chicken's been going for a little over half an hour here, and it is starting to fall apart, which is what I actually want it to do. I don't want entire chicken breasts being a part of our stew. So as it's cooking here in these final stages, I'm kind of breaking it up into smaller pieces as I go, and just letting it continue to tenderize as it boils. And we've got to get our noodles ready to put in here. But before we do that, we're going to be putting in some cream. The recipe calls for a teacupful of cream. Now, as you may know, a teacupful is not an exact measurement. I've got about 3/4 of a cup here of cream, but you can use whatever amount you would like. While our chicken is finishing up in the cream, I'm just going to get these noodles to where they actually look like noodles. They've been out here for close to an hour now, and the recipe says to flour it, and so I'm going to put a light layer of flour here on top, and then you have options. You can either roll it like you would a jelly roll and slice, or you can fold it and slice. I'm actually going to go for the second of those. Now, I'm sure that in 1902 they wouldn't have been using a pizza cutter, but I am choosing to do that just to make my job a little bit easier today. It's okay if there's some extra flour on these, because that flour is going to serve as the thickener for our stew. In fact, the recipe has an option where if you don't want to use noodles, you could have added flour along with the cream and just let that be the end of that recipe. But I thought the noodles sounded a lot better. So we're gonna put these noodles in and let that cook for another 10 minutes, and our stew should be done at that point. Not too shabby at all. This makes for a nice, comfort food, warm, rustic meal that does definitely have that old feeling to it, but also is still flavorful enough that I think this holds up today. If I had any complaints about this, it would be that the noodles were just too thick. I needed to roll those out more, they needed to be thinner, and I think if that was the case, this would have been even better. Surprisingly, the flavor of the broth was a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. It had that chicken flavor, but then the cream helped it out with some fat, and of course there was a little bit of fat that came off the chicken as well in that sauce. The chicken was tender, it was falling apart. I think the breasts were definitely more tender than the thighs, but both were fully cooked, and both were falling apart enough that this made this feel like a stew and not just giant pieces of chicken in a broth. The noodles kind of overtook everything else, but I do think this works, and if I had to do this again, I might change some of the proportions, I might use less noodles, and of course thinner noodles. However, this was definitely a win. This recipe took over place number 12, which was inhabited by our last episode, as you can see, and I'll be curious to see how long it holds on to that spot. I'm curious, put in the comments below what you think of this recipe. Would you make this? Is this something that you would make for your family? If it is, I would encourage you to go ahead and try making this. Let me know how it turned out, and if not, don't worry, we've got other recipes on the way, and hopefully one of those will suit your taste a little bit better. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Recipe Reviver.